adjustments. So see how far away from the mic I
Oh,
am,
that
right?
sounds good.
What was wrong?
They came and calibrated the gain and the pickup and I don't know all the parameters behind mics, but
Sounds a lot better.
sounds better.
Yeah,
Um,
like 1,000,000 times better. That was really.
too loud. Test, 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 test. It's okay.
Pretty good.
So what was wrong with them?
You said they recalibrated.
Recalibrated.
I can't. I don't speak the
You
lingo.
emailed that? I haven't read your email. I haven't looked at the emails. Marie, did you send that today? I saw she emailed.
Okay, guys, we should be live on YouTube. Marie, do you want to double check our feed real fast?
She didn't hear you.
Marie, can you check the feed real fast? See if we're live on YouTube. The virtual camera's on, so it should pop up here in a minute. So let me know if you see it. Okay, we're live on YouTube if you guys are ready to get started.
All right. Welcome to the North Logan City Planning Commission meeting of December 12th, 2024. We will begin with opening ceremonies. Porter with the pledge and Heather with the prayer.
Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered here this evening and grateful for the opportunity we have to serve and support our community. We are grateful for the wonderful citizens who live here and care and provide so much support and input in our community. We pray that we will be mindful of the citizens and do the best we can in making decisions this evening. And we pray for a watch over all of our community. And we say these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I second. Oh, I always mess that up.
I'll make
Have to
I'll make
motion
that
it.
motion.
I was like, I think we have to.
I'll make that motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll second it. Yeah. I was like, I think we just messed that up.
All right, all in favor?
I
Opposed? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous Planning Commission meetings.
I'll motion to approve the minutes of our previous planning commission meeting.
I'll second that.
Do we
That's good.
need a date on that? Because I don't. Okay, I was like, I can't remember the date, November 7th. It's right here. Sorry, I had it.
All right, we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Scott, any follow-up from previous meetings?
Yeah, just to follow up on the Village Springs project, south of Cinnamon Ridge off of Wolfpack Way, about 2360 north. That project, originally when it went to the city council during their second meeting in November, was denied based on a couple of findings. The fact that it was not entirely two-story and the private roads was an issue for at least one of our city council members. After that meeting, the developer came in and chatted with a couple of the city council members and the mayor along with staff and said, what do we need to do to adjust this to make it meet code, or what are the sticking points that the council had? And so they had a little bit of a mini work session to identify those items, and then they made an adjustment to their proposal, came back and said, we're okay to do 100% two-story, and worked on a adjustment to the private roads where the roads would remain private, but a public access easement would be on the sidewalks of the private streets. So people who are traversing on the sidewalks from the city center north and east through that area of town could use that private walkway. Well, it's not private, it's public, on the southwest corner through that development on the private streets and through to 2400 North without worrying about being on a public street, or a private street, because it's a public easement. So that was kind of a mix of allowing for the private streets, but also maintaining the public access through that development. That went back to the city council as a reconsidered item at their meeting last night and did get conditionally approved with those adjustments. There's a couple of additional conditions in that approval, but for the most part, that project has an approval to move forward with their plating. So this body, the Planning Commission, will be looking at their preliminary plat likely in January, maybe the first meeting in February, depending on if they get their details in a row in time.
So a question regarding that. So all the roads will be private.
Not all
Not
of
the
them
main one.
So the main one that goes through it will
remain public.
remain public.
So it's the majority of the frontage roads that provide frontage to those homes. There's 3 of them that front on the public street, that 2360 up to
Right.
2400. That road was originally proposed to be public and will remain public. The private streets, as conditionally approved, will remain private, but the sidewalks that line those private streets will have a public easement, so the public can walk on the sidewalks. So
And
that
then
was
there
the
was some concern
balance.
about the intersection there too, how it curved. Was that?
Oh, on the northeast corner.
Yeah.
The concern was more a concern of those existing residences on the north and Cinnamon Ridge. As we looked at the line work, they are encroaching in the public right of way.
So when you widen that out, it can be fairly straight and be
Yeah.
fine. Okay.
Yep. So the developer will be working with those property owners to remove the encumbrances and move that road through where it connects as a straight T with that intersection. So that was a concern the public had, but it's a technicality that probably shouldn't be an issue, but is because of the encroachment. But we'll clean that up as we go along. But that's where that project is as far as the city center development plan. It's kind of a pre-review because it's in the city center. We'll look at it again when it comes for more of a technical review for the preliminary plat. So either next meeting or the following, depending on when they get all their application items submitted and reviewed. It'll be back before this body.
So they said 100% 2-story? And is it still going to be 55 and older? Or
It will be. Yeah, one of the conditions that was added to the staff report is that if we are going to allow it to be private streets, we want to have it be a 55 plus. Without being 55 plus, you get a lot more parking on the street and it's a little bit more narrow. It doesn't function quite as well for a traditional, neighborhood. So it will be 55 plus, it will be 2 stories. They will have, as an additional condition, they will be submitting more floor plans
that's
in
what
a
I
2-story variety to make sure we have the architectural variety and making sure we don't have any copying pasting on the same street front. So that's one of the conditions we'll verify, and it's timed to be submitted before the final plat. So before they move forward and sell any lots, we want to know what home plan is on each lot. So that'll be, I think, a good step.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's the only follow-up I have from our last meeting.
Okay, great. Well, we'll move into our regular commission business. We have one item today, conditional use permit. And so with these, we are the approving body. So tonight's, it's not a recommendation today. All right.
You're a voting member tonight.
I heard
Great.
First time.
I heard his yay.
Great, excellent. All right, we'll, Scott, if you'll go through the staff report and then we'll give time to the applicant if they are.
Yeah. One point of clarification, if you look at the agenda and cross-compare that with the top of the staff report, I misrepresented the address. So the agenda shows an address of 2232 North, 1450 East. That is the mailing address for the applicant. It is not the property address. The property address is correct in the staff report with 1503 East, 2300 North. So a little discrepancy there. I wanted to make sure we're looking at the same thing. I'm going to hop into the GIS map real quick and pull this up on the aerial view just so everybody can see where we're at. All right, 1503, 2300 North. Okay, so this property, a single family home at the end of a long lane, it's kind of a flag lot off of 2300 North. It's in the RE1 zone. This particular home already has a home-based business, and that home-based business is currently operating with a child daycare of up to, but not to exceed 8 children. Our code allows for home-based businesses in all single-family residential zones, and the daycare allowance is by right up to 8 children. If a home-based daycare wants to increase from 6 up to the maximally allowed based on state code, which is 16, then they do need to come to the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit with that use. So that is the request of the applicant, is to expand from the currently permitted 8 up to the 16 in the request. When we're looking at a conditional use permit, remember, conditional use is, albeit conditionally permitted, there's still property rights, and there's a very narrow window in which the Planning Commission can deny a conditional use permit, and the denial has to be based on very specific findings as to how the proposal does not meet code or cannot be, the reasonably anticipated impacts cannot be mitigated. Not eliminated, but mitigated. So those, when we're looking at these, we have to look at them in that narrow scope. One of the things we wanted to look at when we were looking at the property was, what are the parameters, what are the applicable regulations, and does it meet those requirements, yes or no? And pretty quickly after reviewing this, staff found that the access lane is narrow. When you look at the county plat, pull it up here, this is one of your exhibits in the report. The fee title ownership of this lane is in favor of this property owner. However, the width is 17 feet on both ends. So it's consistently 17 feet throughout from front to back. The lane itself, as you can see here, is 450 feet long. And when we're looking at this, if we're expanding a use, adding additional traffic access for trips, we want to see, hey, is there a constraint there? The applicable code would be the fire code when we're looking at this. Given the length, this lane needs to be a minimum of 20 feet wide. It needs to be able to hold 75,000 pounds. It needs to have an adequate turnaround at the end of the lane. And when we were looking at this, none of those are true characteristics of what is there now. So if we wanted to look at this, a reasonable condition could be install a turnaround, make the lane thicker so you can hold 75,000 pounds, make it wider so that it's at least 20 feet wide. But one of the conditions that we can't make happen is the width. The width is 17 feet, so there's not a way for us to request as a condition that it be widened, unless they were to go and work and purchase property from an adjacent property owner, which I think is an unreasonable condition. And so you'll see in the staff report that it does have a negative recommendation based on the finding that it does not meet the fire code, the access lane, nor could it with a reasonable condition. So those are the facts and the findings that we found through the analysis and why it carries a negative staff recommendation. But do you guys have any questions for staff? I don't think we have our applicant present tonight.
Just with the 17-foot, not being able to, you can't widen that. There's just property owner restrictions on that.
Well, yeah, the ownership right now is at 17 feet, so they'd have to go and purchase 3 feet
No
from
more
their neighbor.
land for that.
They'll ask for an easement or something from the people, the
They could.
landowners, but I don't, then
Yeah.
you still have to asphalt it or cement it or something to make it
Yeah.
So it could carry that weight.
They could ask for an easement. That is a good clarification if the owners wanted to grant that. And then we could do some conditions to widen and improve the turnaround. But I think it's just a step further than what is reasonable.
And that's on the city to do that.
No, it would be on the applicant to do that.
Applicant to pave the road, all that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Private.
It's not a public street, it's a private
And ask for the
lane.
easement, right, both.
Mhm.
But the hammerhead, like not having a hammerhead turnaround for fire and emergency is
Yeah, they
probably
w-
the biggest.
They would need one, right?
Yeah.
There's not a turnaround. There's a couple of different options in the fire code. It's a 60-foot wide or a hammerhead or a 90-foot diameter roundabout cul-de-sac. So they could install one of those on their property. There's enough room to do so if they wanted to install one. But at the end of the day, the lane width is one of those things that even if they were willing to do all those improvements, they just don't have the width to meet that fire code. And so that is the reason for the staff's negative recommendation based on that finding that it does not simply comply with that standard.
So I've got a question. So I'm looking at the Appendix D from the fire code
Mhm.
that you sent us. And right at the top, it says the provisions contained in this appendix aren't mandatory unless they're adopted in the ordinance. So I went to our municipal code to see where we adopt our fire code. And we basically say we're going to follow the state's adoption of this as the fire code. And I didn't go to the state to figure out did they adopt the International Fire Code with Appendix D specifically. So can you help me trace that line? Because, the requirements on 20 feet wide and 7,500 pounds and the turnaround options are all not mandatory unless adopted specifically in ordinance.
So it's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer for you. We do have our fire marshal. I don't know, Chief Keller, do you know the answer to that?
Okay,
So
that's what so that's what I thought may be true. So I think it's a good guide. I think it's something that we should do, but I don't know as if it is a finding of fact that is a requirement.
Yeah, it could be a good, if we're using this as an assumption, yeah, that's true. We would want to make sure it's in fact a requirement. My understanding was that it was, but I'm not sure if I'm correct in that.
So is there other code or other regulation that would require a 20-foot access over such a distance? Or
Not for a private lane. For a public street, yes. If it was a city standard right of way, then yeah, there would be a standard. This is an interesting parcel where it's not a platted parcel. It has a meets and bounds description, so it's kind of one of those historic, likely grandfathered building parcels, not necessarily a building lot if it's not platted in a subdivision plat. And so, theoretically, the use for a single-family home could be grandfathered. The home-based business is a permitted use in any home in a single-family zone. But the conditional use permit is for the expansion from 8 to 16. The only other thing, you would have to look at access to the other homes on the lane. There's one other home that takes direct access off of the lane to the north. This lot up here, it has an access easement across this lane. They don't own the land underneath that access point, but it is the only access for this home back here. But I don't have a code in the back of my mind that says that home towards the rear is entitled to have the same standard of access as it does now with an approval for a home-based business on an adjacent home. Whether that's not permitted to increase the congestion on that private lane or not, there's nothing in code that I can think of. The general plan does speak to keeping the characteristic of the neighborhood when we're considering home-based businesses, that the character of the neighborhood should be in question, and that that should not be, any home-based business should not get to the scale or the size that would change the character. They should blend in. For the most part, a home-based business should, not really be noticeable. So we have CPAs and, folks who work from home, have online businesses, run e-commerce, those types of things at home all the time. You would never know that they're there. Daycares are probably the most impactful home-based business that I can think of. People that have a salon in their home, they might have one client, every hour or two, but not all day, every day.
16 kids is a lot.
That's a lot
an
of coming and
impact.
going. Yeah.
So is there a public easement or public safety easement on this lane, or is it truly?
It's just a private driveway with a fee title strip. So they own the land on that narrow strip. They own those 17 feet, and their driveway just happens to be really long. So there's not necessarily a public easement. My understanding is there's just an access easement to that one additional home towards the rear. And it's not a public safety easement for the public per se.
So do you know what the traffic counts? Because this is coming off of 2300 North. We know what the daily traffic counts for that road are?
Not off the top of my head, no. I mean, you could stand out there on 2300 North and maybe count 100 cars a day, maybe a few more. It's not a heavily trafficked street. And so access, onto and off of 2300 North could be a little bit problematic if you have like an AM and a PM rush backing up on the lane trying to get in and out. But I don't necessarily think that it's terribly impactful to the baseline traffic on 2300. Yeah.
A typical garage is 20 feet wide to hold 2 cars, right?
About, yeah.
So if you have one car going down the lane and one coming back, there's likely going to be interference or.
Yeah, I went and took photos of this because I wanted to get a real true sense of just how wide this lane is. And it really is 17 feet, the legal lane width. When you get out there, there is a fence on either side, so it's not like you can kind of squish off to the side and try to get around, one vehicle or the next. My question really is in a heavy snowy winter, you have snow
That
piled
was,
up on either
yeah,
side.
that, and they're plowing that. It doesn't have very where to go.
Yeah. I mean, arguably you can get a fire truck down here, it's not like you can't get a vehicle back there if you need to, but in really poor weather, get some soft dirt going on and there's no way to pull off. I think that could be problematic. I did talk to this gentleman who lives back here when I went out to take those photos. He was actually leaving his home heading south and I was parked right here taking some photos. And I chatted with him and he said, hey, we do have a couple of issues where we have to kind of take our turn down the lane. If you see someone coming down it or turning onto it, you kind of have to just wait. He did actually have a stroke, he said, last year, and he had an emergency vehicle come and pick him up at that location. He said luckily it was later in the evening and there wasn't any conflicts, but it's not that you don't have an emergency. It's just very, seldom. But you've got 16 kids, and so it is concerning to have that much traffic. The home itself, it has passed inspection by the state. I forget the governing board that does those home inspections for daycares. So it has been looked at to see if the home itself is adequate to have a 16 child capacity, which it's passed. The fire marshal has looked at it, and it looks like it will do just fine for 16 kids. But when it comes from an accessibility, that's where I start to get a little sweaty about its access. More than likely you'll not have many conflicts. It might not be as convenient, but I think there is a safety concern there. And I think that if you were to really truly want to make a motion to deny it, you would want to be based on the safety. I mean, the true nature of government is health, safety, welfare, and any finding of safety or adverse impact to safety is a finding we would want to have. And so if we're concerned about us having technically adopted the fire code instead of it being advisory, then I think the only finding that could reasonably stand the test of an appeal would be based off of a true concern over health and safety, which the general plan does speak to. It says any home-based businesses should be based on a home-based or based on the impact to a neighborhood. And I think the safety is an impact to a neighborhood. But if you'd like to get a very clear understanding as to what we may have or may not have adopted as far as the city is concerned, I'd be happy to go dig a little bit deeper. I'm sure, Chief Keller, you're probably correct in that we may not have adopted the fire code in its entirety with all of its appendixes, that specifically, but we certainly use the fire code as a very specific guide for good reason.
Any more questions for Scott?
Teresa does.
I just wonder, obviously this has been this way for quite some time, this private. If that was brought in today and somebody wanted to do that, would that be, like, would it be allowed? Because, I mean, it is a concern for both of those families, to me.
Yeah, and I have been with the city for a little over 2 years now, and my understanding is when the business first was proposed, there was concern with the 8, but knowing that it was a by right use, land use, we didn't feel like we had the legal authority to say no. With the conditional use, we have a little bit more teeth, and one piece of language I want to just read with you real quick. Let me pull up the code here. It's in our conditional use ordinance, and our conditional use ordinance is really where any findings to deny a conditional use permit need to be based on that ordinance or any other applicable standard in the code. So let me go to the community development webpage. Go to the municipal code.
10-200.
The 10-200. Yeah. Well, that's going to be your home-based business license code. 10-800.
Oh,
Conditional use.
sorry, I was looking at where the fire code was adopted.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm
12
looking.
12C507.
Yeah, 12C5. So in this ordinance, it has a very specific list of findings that a planning commission would have to make in order to approve a conditional use permit. And I think the same could be to deny if you can't make these findings. And the second point here says the use will not be unreasonably detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity, or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity. And in the staff report, I took these and I said, look, can we make any of these true? And the way that I wrote it, I said, the use will be unreasonably detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity. Without meeting the minimum fire code standards for a fire access road, the use could be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public in the event of an emergency requiring emergency vehicle access to the property. So I think if there's a concern of making the finding on the fire code and being concerned that the fire code may or may not have been specifically adopted by the city, I think we could still make a finding that it is unreasonably detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare, and say due to the width of the lane and not being able to get two-way traffic on 17 feet of width. That could, I think, be a reasonable finding.
Especially during inclement weather or something along those lines. Any other questions for Scott? Right, I don't see the applicant here to speak for themselves. So we won't have them do that. Just wanted it on the record, though. Okay, well, we get to make a decision, I guess. I won't make a motion because I'm chairing the meeting, but my recommendation, if I were to make a motion, my recommendation would be to have staff go back and look through the chain of the fire code, and if that can stand, and if not, see how they might rewrite the staff report. But
Is that going to reasonably change things, though?
I think so.
mean,
I think I could make a motion to deny on the basis of unreasonably detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of persons residing, working, or attending preschool in the area, daycare.
And I would tie that to the finding that the lane is only 17 feet wide. So there's your fact, and then your finding being the code for the conditional use permit.
If Marie can get that into the thing, I'm great. I would make that motion.
I don't have anything against that. I just want to state, I think regardless of whether we can tie the fire code back to statute, I think that's good requirements to but I think that, so the IFC is the fire emergency response, or the fire and emergency arm of the building code. Whether or not it's adopted, this comes from many, many years of studying fire emergency
so
situations.
we do have a motion. We either need
Have a second
we either
before
need
you
a
discuss.
second or
I'll second it.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. Let's discuss.
Okay, we could do that now, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's highly prudent that we adopt the motion, whether or not it's statutorily tied to or implemented at the state level. It's definitely, it comes from many years of studying these situations and trying to prevent loss of life and health. So.
I don't disagree. My worry is that we have had a conditional use permit get appealed and overturned on appeal. So I just wanted to make sure that our facts and findings would be appeal proof.
Okay.
And that's where
That's good.
my concern comes
I
from.
think they are, just because I think the 17 feet.
There's a fact
it.
and a finding,
Yeah.
so that shouldn't,
If I may offer maybe another snippet of state code that we could maybe weave into the motion just to shore it up a bit. When we're making a decision on a conditional use permit, this is on your first page of the staff report. I put this in all of our conditional use permit reports, mostly because it's a good reminder anytime we're considering these types of requests, what the state code does or does not allow. And towards the bottom, it says, conditional uses may only be denied if specific findings of fact and conclusions of law demonstrate that the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of a proposed conditional use cannot be substantially mitigated by the proposal or the implementation of reasonable conditions to achieve compliance with applicable standards. This applicable standards, I think, is where Gavin's concern comes in with the
that's what you're
fire
talking about,
code.
Gavin, right?
But I do think that we can make a pretty strong argument that there's an overwhelming concern of health and safety, and that there is not a mitigating condition that could solve that with a reasonable condition. I think asking them to go buy 3 feet of land from their potentially
little
unwilling
excessive.
neighbor is excessive,
And then
So-
to have it paved because it's their road.
right? Yep.
But they could. if
They could.
If they wanted to go try to solve those issues and work with their neighbors and acquire the land and install
Yeah,
an
then they
adequate
could.
access road with a turnaround that meets all those standards, I think we'd be a lot less concerned, but that's not part of the proposal in front of us tonight.
That's correct.
So we have a motion. Any more discussion on that motion?
Do we need to add in additional language, Teresa?
If you were wanting to amend at all to add more language, I would add this sentence and just leave it at the fact that the anticipated detrimental effects of the proposal cannot be substantially mitigated by the proposal.
I would like to add that to my motion.
Again,
And do we need to read that, or you just did, so it's
I
fine.
think, yeah, I think we can tack it on to what we had before.
All right, so we have an amended motion. More on that? All right, well, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay. All right. Thanks for the discussion, everyone. Let's go to staff business. Scott.
Okay, there's just one item, well, there's two items I want to bring to your attention. The first is we're coming up to the end of the year and we're starting to look at our 2025 schedule. So let me hop back over to folder. I think I closed it. Let's go back. So I put together a calendar each year, in November, December, and I do it selfishly because I want to know what are the available windows for family vacations and trips in the following year. But it's also something that we're supposed to do as a community to plan for our public meetings and make sure we don't have very many conflicts as much as possible. So what I did is we're looking at, we typically meet the first and third Thursdays of each month. But we all know that there are some holidays and certain conferences that we tend to attend as staffers and as planning commissioners and city council members that sometimes make it difficult to hold a regular scheduled meeting. Additionally, with spring break, fall break, sometimes we have a hard time getting a quorum together in some of those instances. So I wanted to schedule this out and see what we had. And for the most part, we're trying to stick with the same first and third Thursday of every month, but we do have some unique months, January being one of them. April is one of our more busy months for spring break conferences. So the last 2 years we've had one meeting in April and it's worked out well where we try to split the difference. June is a little bit interesting where we're looking to the state for a little bit of clarification as to when they are going to observe Juneteenth. Juneteenth this year does land on the 19th, which is a Thursday, but there is some discussion that they may recognize, or what's the word I'm looking for? Celebrate. Anyways, or observe. There's your word. They may observe it on the 16th, on the preceding Monday. So you'll see that June has 2 red dots. We'll clarify that once the legislature provides us with some clarification there. December, we traditionally hold one meeting in the middle of the month like we are now. But I wanted to throw this out there. The city council did review this during their meeting yesterday, and they did adopt this as our formal schedule for next year. Again, this is our tentative schedule. We can adjust when and how needed. We just need to provide adequate notice to the public. The other thing that I've highlighted here is the Utah APA conference in the fall has not yet been formally scheduled. So we have it tentatively in there, but it may adjust a little bit. The biggest thing to put on everybody's radar is this window of time in May, 7th, 8th, and 9th. The Utah APA, American Planning Association chapter, is holding their spring conference in Logan. It's been a while since they've been this far north, but because it's in Logan itself, they do request that communities in the area participate and provide some sessions and some walking tours and some content for that conference. And one of the things that we're kind of looking into is our city center master plan consultant and our general plan consultant would like to host a conference session to present our city center master plan, which I think is a great opportunity for us to show off the planning work that we're doing. And we may have some other session ideas or some other items that we may host as a local community. And the planning for that conference has started early. So right now the planning committee is working on some session ideas. And I just wanted to put this on everybody's radar because it likely will be a good event to attend, just given its close nature. We don't have to travel. But also there might be some opportunities for some of our planning commissioners or city council members to sit on panels and host some of those discussions. So if you would be interested in sitting in the limelight.
You want me to nominate some people now?
I think maybe we'll go with the volunteer route. We don't have specific sessions planned yet, but we might get to that point. But if anybody is interested, or if they feel like there's a topic that we should present, let me know. But I think that our general plan and our city center master plan is probably the preeminent planning work we've been doing in our community that we should be proud of and put it out there for the rest of the state to admire. So that's an FYI. That's those dates are when we know for sure that conference will be held. It'll be here in town. So keep that on the schedule, and I'll provide you with more information as opportunities and as plans start to come together. Okay. I think that is it, just from the staff business side of things.
So you did have an item on here on planning commission training. I know I need some more, so I'll come talk to you about that.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're really close. We just have maybe one more individual who's working on some final credits, so I won't call you out.
Good job being done.
I think I got mine done.
Yeah, Heather's done. Yep. Yeah,
The drive from Tooele last night.
more of a
It was
reminder.
helpful.
We should give we should give
I
it
was
a
a passenger. I was working and also doing training. It was very productive.
yeah we should give a small token award for the first one to get done every year. So yeah.
I'll never compete for that.
You know, I think Gavin was close. You took care of a lot of training early on, so you've got a lot of hours. So you're doing well.
I think I have the one required
You
one
have
to
one more
go. I'm so
requirement.
close.
I had to do the 8-minute one.
Yeah, so one more to go. We'll get it.
No, but I do appreciate you guys taking the initiative to get that taken
I had
care
no
of.
less to do. Mine is
Yeah, Tracy was
Tracy did really well. Yep.
Mine is prorated. See, I was only.
I did a lot at the beginning and then waited till the end to do the 8-minute video.
Yeah, so thanks for everyone's effort to do that. We have to have that to be a valid planning commission. So we want to be valid. Yeah.
Ballot.
Excellent.
I need validation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
All right. Any business from any of the planning commissioners?
I just really want that count.
Seeing none,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn?
let's set an agenda first. Let's make sure I said set next agenda.
Oh.
Do we need a motion for that, or?
No, not necessarily. I think it is important to note that it is a non-standard month next month. So we will be meeting instead of on the 2nd and the 16th.
So,
You need to go to your calendar.
do we have access to this calendar on the drive?
Mhm.
Okay.
Scroll it a little bit. I just have two
Yeah.
more dates to enter. Thank you.
Oh, you're fast.
Thank
All right,
you.
so the next meeting on the 16th, and now the motion that was headed this way.
I already made it.
All right.
Oh, I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh,
Teresa.
Teresa.
Teresa made the motion.
And then second.
I was shut down.
Second
I
was Heather.
second. I'm sorry.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks
And,
everybody.
and Scott, your mic works.